Hello, everyone. Good evening, dear guests, dear colleagues, dear Your Excellency, Ambassador Faruk Ageti, Ambassador Schmunk. Welcome tonight to the Heinrich-Böll Foundation here in Berlin and online to the book launch and discussion that we titled Documenting Massacres in Kosovo 1998-1999, A Step Towards Reconciliation. Reconciliation is quite a big word, and our interest today is to understand better how do the affected societies actually cope with coming to the terms with the past. My name is Katja Giebel. I'm working here with the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in Berlin in the Southeast and East Europe division, focusing on the Western Balkans, and I thank you for joining today and for your interest in this difficult topic. Today, over a quarter of a century later, we look back. The Kosovo War was one of the last conflicts of the Yugoslav wars in the 90s that were the first major armed confrontation on European territory after World War II. And to this day, there's thousands of victims that are missing the trauma of war, and hate narratives are present and damaging until this day the relations between Kosovo and Serbia. The author, Shkelzen Gashi, has published an important work. He documented the atrocities of that time. It is 83 massacres, including 2 of Serbian civilians. His merit is to summarize and to offer data that is revealing new or updated information about the victims, about the perpetrators, and the search for justice. Given the lack of documentation, the book should also serve as an educational resource and help preserve the collective memory of Kosovo by providing a more accurate picture of Kosovo. So why are we doing this as a green political foundation? Why are we hosting this book presentation today in Berlin? 2025 is marking very significant anniversaries. We are 80 years after the end of World War II and 30 years after the genocide of Srebrenica. The collective memory of Kosovo and of the Kosovo War refers mostly to the NATO intervention rather than the reasons that led to the bombing, and less exists a collective memory of the individual events during the war. Today, it's also 3 years now that Russia is waging war against Ukraine. The war between Israel and Palestine is continuing, and to name only the most immediate wars in and of Europe. And we are currently experiencing a major shift in security policy. Alone last Friday, the éclat in the Oval Office marked the departure of the US as the guardian of the transatlantic world order as we know it. And this new geopolitical environment is emboldening populist forces, as we can already see. And this makes coming to terms with the past actually all the more important, and taboos and rifts on all sides need to be overcome. History and dealing with the history of the region is one of our major concerns of our work as a political foundation in our offices in Belgrade and Sarajevo. We offer publications on print and online that have regional approaches and that actually ask how are the societies coping today, what is needed, what is missing for a peaceful living together. You can also find these kind of publications outside. And for these questions, the book of Shkelzen Gashi is an excellent starting point for our panel. So I would also especially welcome our dear panel. And also I would like to thank you all for your willingness to contribute and to discuss. Many thanks also to the Southeast Europe Association, who are co-hosting this evening. And the Deputy Director, Victoria Palm-Vogelsinger from Munich, is also with us. Please join me for a second. Victoria, please have a word.
Thank you, Katja. Welcome and good evening also from my side. Welcome, Ambassador Ageti. Welcome, distinguished panelists. The Southeast Europe Association, an organization funded by the Federal Foreign Office, has been engaged with the region of Southeast Europe since our foundation in 1952. And a key focal point of our work in the Western Balkans has always been reconciliation and dealing with the past, which is why we also, for instance, put this topic of reconciliation very high on the agenda in the previous civil society fora, which we hosted together with the Aspen Institute Germany in the framework of the Berlin process. And I would like to thank you very much, the Boell Foundation, and especially you, Katja and Walter, for inviting us to join and to partner on this very important, very timely event on a very sensitive topic. Reconciliation is not possible without the truth. Or more specifically, it's not possible without an agreement on what is the truth or what are the facts. And in the Western Balkans, the memory of war and violence is still very present. Traumas have not been overcome, wounds have not healed and could not heal because there are still loved ones missing, there are still disappeared persons. Many crimes have not been documented yet, and I hope the book will shine a light on some of them. Many crimes have not been atoned for, and the rhetoric by politicians is not contributing to reconciliation at all. And most of all, what is lacking in the Western Balkans, in the region, is actually agreement on what is the truth and what are the facts. And therefore, today's event is very important and timely, and I'm very much interested in hearing our distinguished panel's insights and assessments on the state of reconciliation and what can be done to actually promote reconciliation. What are the prospects of this process in the region? Thank you.
Let me tell you also what we plan. The discussion will last until 8:30, and after that we can continue informally outside over cold beverages and pretzel. There also the book itself is available at the bookstall. Let me also finally thanks to all the colleagues in the Heinrich-Böll Foundation who realized this evening, especially also my colleague Jana Falkenroth, who should be somewhere here. Yeah, and now I would like to give the floor to Your Excellency Faruk Ayeti, Ambassador of Kosovo in Berlin, for your welcome address. And right after that, I would like to welcome the panel to the stage. Thanks a lot for being with us tonight, and please have the floor.
Good evening also from my side, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung for inviting me to deliver this welcome address at the presentation of the book Massacres in Kosovo 1998-1999 by Shkelzen Gashi. 26 years after the Kosovo War, we finally have a detailed study of the mass crimes committed by Serbian Yugoslav army and state forces assisted by Serbian paramilitaries. The research for this book took 5 years, longer than the war itself. In this important work, Shkelzen Gashi documents these war crimes to honor the memory of all the victims. His book is based on multiple credible sources, including independent research, eyewitness testimonies, reports from international human rights organizations, Western media, and findings from UN War Crimes Tribunal. Published in Albanian, Serbian, and English, it not only details the massacres across Kosovo, but also includes harrowing images that illustrate the war's brutality. In 1918, the US Senator Hiram Johnson said, "The first casualty when war comes is truth." I would add, but facts remain undeniable. Let me share some of them with you. According to the United Nations, ethnic cleansing by Belgrade during the Kosovo War displaced around 1 million Kosovo Albanians. The Humanitarian Law Centers, led by Natasha Kandic, reports that 13,518 people were killed, including 1,133 children. Over 20 Kosovo Albanian women were subjected to sexual violence. Even today, 1,647 individuals remain missing. 1,227 of them are believed to be in mass graves in Serbia. More than 200 public and private buildings and 650 villages were destroyed. These are facts. These facts remain undeniable. This is the devastating legacy of the war. The book documents 83 massacres, providing details about the time, location, number, and age of victims, as well as their ethnicity and gender. Another 22 cases are listed with incomplete data. Of the 105 massacres recorded, 103 were committed by Serbian Yugoslav army and state forces. The sad reality is that most of these crimes remain unpunished. Many have not even been brought to trial. This 2-kilogram book over there is filled with undeniable facts, making it an essential resource for anyone seeking the truth about the war in Kosovo. After the war, Kosovo faced both international and local judicial proceedings. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, ICTY, indicted 15 individuals, including the entire Yugoslav and Serbian leadership. Further investigations were conducted by UNMIK, 1999 until 2008, OILEX 2008 until 2014, and Kosovo's own judicial institution since 2015. In addition, the Specialist Prosecutor's Office in The Hague, which was established on 1st of September 2016, is also handling cases of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and other offenses under Kosovo's law, allegedly committed between January 1st, 1998 until December 2000. The paradox of this court is that it focuses only on the alleged crimes of one side, while ignoring crimes committed by others, no matter their ethnicity or nationality. However, judicial statistics from Kosovo and Serbia reveal a troubling pattern. More Kosovo Albanians have been indicted and convicted for war-related crimes, despite the fact the vast majority of victims were Kosovo Albanians. By 2021, in Serbia, only 43 people have been charged with war crimes and just 17 were convicted. This shows that Serbia has done little to hold the war criminals accountable. But any attempt to equate the aggressor with the victim is a grave mistake. This does not help the victims. It only encourages the aggressor to repeat actions that should never happen again. Even efforts to uncover the truth have faced threats. In October 2020, Serbia's Speaker of the Parliament, Ivica Dačić, publicly warned that any Serbs who provided information about mass graves of Albanian victims would be labeled a traitor. History teaches us that facing the past is difficult, but necessary. This is true not only in the Balkans, but in the many regions around the world. Today, the demand for justice remains strong because all the victims, regardless of their race, ethnic group, religion, gender, age, nationality, or political affiliation, deserve truth and accountability. Serbia has a long history of fueling regional instability, having started 4 wars against Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo. In other words, Serbia remains a hostage to its own past. The sooner Belgrade confronts its history, the better it will be for its future and also for the region. But for this to happen, to paraphrase the former Belgrade mayor Bogdan Bogdanovic, Serbia must be led by politicians who have the courage to embrace Western values and take responsibility for the past crimes, including the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Kosovo. One example of this struggle is the investigation of the Račak massacre, which I studied a few years ago. The massacre was a turning point in the Kosovo War, when Serbian forces killed 45 Kosovo Albanian civilians. Since Belgrade refused an independent investigation, Finnish forensic experts from the University of Helsinki were called in. Their report confirmed that the victims were not killed from a distance, disproving Serbian claims. The team's leader, Helena Ranta, called it a crime against humanity. At that time, Serbian officials were relieved because Ranta's report did not use the legal term massacre. However, she explained that the massacre is not a legal term, it is a legal term, not a medical one, and personally described Račak as a bloody massacre. Even today, the Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić denies what happened in Račak. He is still calling a fabrication. More than 2 decades later, we should no longer debate terminology, but instead focus on ensuring that such atrocities never happen again anywhere in the world. True reconciliation does not come from distorting facts, but from accepting reality and offer an apology. An apology is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of moral leadership and accountability. Sadly, the lessons of history, as demonstrated by Willy Brandt, have yet to be learned. Antonio Gramsci once said, "History teaches, but has no pupils." I hope that Shkelzen Gashi's independent research and the tragic stories in his book will bring out the truth and help the reconciliation. We know that facing the past, or as we used to say in German, die Vergangenheitsbewältigung, is not common in the Balkans. But expectations are high because all victims deserve justice, no matter their ethnic background. In the end, the European future of the Western Balkans is not just about reforms, procedures or rules. It's also about accepting the core values of the Western world. Values that some leaders in our region unfortunately still struggle to embrace. Thank you.
So, is it working? Yes, it does. Welcome, dear friends and enemies, if there are those. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much to the Heinrich-Böll Foundation for organizing what I would call a hybrid event, because it is announced in the program as book presentation and discussion, I think. And it's really going to be both. We have a book presentation, but not only, because we are going to discuss about the present and maybe about the future of the region. we're going to have a debate about the present and the future of the region, but the basis is going to be this book that Shkelzen Gashi has worked on for so many years and has brought with us today. It has a rather laconic title. It's called The Massacres in Kosovo, 1998-1991. Now, usually, 91, excuse me. Yeah, we'll speak about 1991 later, but yes, 99, of course. Usually when I moderate, I try to dedicate the same amount of time to the introduction of each panelist. Allow me to slightly deviate from this well-established rule tonight, because it is Shkelzen's book and work that brought us together here. So I will talk a little bit more about him in the introduction than about the three other panelists, because I think you should know a little bit more about how it came to this book and what he did before. And if people write books, I always think the best way to introduce them is not by talking about them, but by talking about their books. And I will do this very briefly in 5 minutes or so. This is a book from Shkelzen Gashi from 2010. It's called Adem Demaci Biography, an unauthorized biography, which I guess should be highlighted. Shkelzen was talking for many, many hours, interviewing the heroes, so to speak, of his book. But in the end, Adem Demaci was not very happy with parts of the result, which does not speak against the quality of a biography. I would say actually on the contrary. And this book is, I think, I really can recommend it. It does have one minor deficiency, allow me to say it, because it can be easily corrected. There are no footnotes, and sometimes important and crucial quotes are not substantiated by the source, but this can be very easily corrected in a second edition. And next year I still recommend the book to anyone who, like me, does not read Albanian. Sometimes people ask me, politicians, diplomats, members of parliament, or others, just, what is Albin Kurti about? Why does he do what he does? Why does he not do what we would like him to do? Why is he the way he is? And I usually say, if you want to understand Albin Kurti, the best is to start by trying to understand Adem Demaci. You will not only understand Kosovar history of the second half of the 20th century well, you will also understand where Albin Kurti comes from and what influenced him, because Adem Demaci was, correct me if this is too much, but more or less the teacher or the role model for the young Albin Kurti. So one of these books. And then there is a series of books which I also very much want to recommend to you, or to those who are interested in the region. It is a trilingual book, or it's 4 trilingual books in Albanian, Serbian, and English. The English title is The Other Serbia, Druga Srbija in Serbian. I don't dare to pronounce it in Albanian because it would probably be wrong. This is an amazing book. This is an amazing series of books, and more are about to come. Number 5, 6, 7 are in preparation. Okay, 8. What is this about? Let's take, for example, the first. Bogdan Bogdanovic has already been mentioned in the speech by the ambassador, former mayor of Belgrade, a liberal, non-nationalist politician who, because he was liberal and non-nationalist, had to leave Serbia. He lived in Vienna in exile, which is also where he died. And these books contain not much more than essays and interviews by Serbian intellectuals, in this case, a politician. Then we have, for example, Srđa Popović, a famous human rights lawyer, who actually went against the nationalist mainstream in Serbia, because not all Serbs in the 90s succumbed to the nationalist frenzy that was dominating, unfortunately, the political landscape in Serbia. People like Bogdanovic, who warned in 1991 in an interview, which you can read here, if we follow this path, we are going to lose Kosovo, and we will have deserved to lose it. Or people like Srđa Popović, who says, sometimes they ask me if I think Albanians were separatists, to which I answer, I quote Srđa Popović, well, maybe if what happened to the Albanians had happened to me, I would also be a separatist. It's very interesting, very important statements that show the obvious, There were Serbs who stood up against the policies of Slobodan Milosevic and his regime. And the genesis or the making of this book is very interesting, because I asked Shkelzen Gashi once, why did you do this book? And he said, well, because I noticed that young Kosovo Albanians do not know this. They think all Serbs were nationalists, all Serbs were anti-Albanian, all Serbs, were enemies of Kosovo, and this is simply not true. I could say, actually, this is not only a book maybe for young Kosovars, but also for young Serbs. And okay, the print run is, I think, 150, so it's very small, and we know many young people don't like to read books because you cannot double click on them, and actually you can. But, it makes just a funny noise, but nothing really happens. But he also put these books online so a broader audience can read them. So this is what I wanted to tell you about Shkelzen Gashi. This is what he did before he did this huge book that we will discuss tonight, a variation of really interesting works in books. And now allow me to introduce the other panelists. Ivana Nikolic came from Belgrade. She was born, and this is why I mentioned this year before, in a year that was very important for the region, 1991, the year when Yugoslavia fell apart and when the bloody conflict began. She studied journalism. She joined BIRN, the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, in 2014. And since last year, I think, she is a research coordinator at the Youth Initiative for Human Rights, where she, I quote now, leads several youth-focused projects aimed at educating younger generations about the region's wartime history, precisely what we are talking about tonight. Then on my left is Arban Mehmeti, a researcher and social scientist born in Kosovo but lives in Berlin for many years. He used to work for the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, a London-based organization, I think, which has an office also here in Berlin. He did projects monitoring Russian disinformation campaigns in the Western Balkans, and he's widely published as an academic. One of the essays I would like to touch up on later, he had a closer look at what the writers in Kosovo and Serbia, or more precise, the writers' associations, did and did not do in the 1980s, and how, unfortunately, the Serbian Writers Association contributed to the conflict. And then, direct to my left, is Michael Schmunk. He used to be with the German Foreign Office, the Auswärtige Amt, from 1983 to 2016. So he began under Foreign Minister Genscher, and I don't know, 16, which minister we had. He is a veteran diplomat in the true sense of the word. He was ambassador in Azerbaijan, in Kosovo, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in Slovakia. He really knows the region, and he never lost touch with the region after he retired. He's also very active in the academic field, writes essays, follows the debates. He was with the Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, Germany's biggest think tank here in Berlin. He was also at the Kennedy School of Government in the US. So he has really a wide-ranging, also wild, range of experience. And I do think we really have a competent panel here to discuss the issues. So much about the introduction. Let's start with the discussion. Shkelzen, before I'd like to ask you questions about the book, there is one question that I think is also important to understand where you stand in Kosovo. You used to be a political advisor of Prime Minister Albin Kurti, but then you were kicked out by him. He sacked you after you said, according to my information, correct me if I'm wrong, on television, I quote, "I have said it several times that individuals, including those in the senior hierarchy of the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, committed war crimes," upon which Prime Minister Kurti dismissed you. Can you explain what was the reaction to your statement? Why did you say it? Why were you sacked? And how are your relations with Prime Minister Kurti today? Okay. Easy question for the beginning.
It's very difficult. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation of my books, and thank you very much for the organizers of this event. I am very, very happy to be here tonight with you, even though the topic we will discuss tonight is a very difficult one. Yeah, it's true. 2021, I guess, I was the political advisor of the Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti, and in an interview I declared that many crimes were committed during the last war in Kosovo in 1998-1999, and also I mentioned that some members of Kosovo Liberation Army were involved in the violations of international humanitarian law. And immediately after my declaration, majority of the media in Kosovo attacked me, also the opposition political parties in Kosovo, and there was a huge campaign against me. And immediately, after 24 hours, the Prime Minister dismissed me. He invited me in his office and he said, please resign. And I said, no, I am not going to resign because I said the truth. And you have two options. Option number one is to protect me because you know very well that I said the truth. And option number two is to dismiss me. And he decided for option number two. So my relations with him are okay. I have protected him when I thought that he's right. And of course, I criticized him when I was sure that he's doing wrong.
So you are still on speaking terms after this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say a few things about the project, the Other Serbia, because since you mentioned it, and it's my favorite project, I like it very much. I learned from these intellectuals, from Adem Demaci in 2008, 2009, when I started to write the biography of Adem Demaci. And because he was in prison with Lazar Stojanovic, and he told me that Bogdan Bogdanovic, Srđa Popovic, Lazar Stojanovic, Zagorka Golubovic, and these Serbian intellectuals are the true sons of Serbian nation, not Slobodan Milošević, Vojislav Šešelj, Arkan, and the others. So I learned a lot from him. And when I finished the biography of Adem Demaci, I started to collect the interviews, articles, and declarations of Serbian intellectuals who opposed the regime of Slobodan Milošević for the violation of human rights of Albanians during the 90s. So I started to search the daily newspapers in Kosovo and Serbia, weekly magazines in Kosovo and Serbia, to collect articles, interviews, declarations of Serbian intellectuals who opposed Milošević from March 1999, when Serbia removed the autonomy of Kosovo, till June 1999, when NATO troops entered in the territory of Kosovo. The main aim of this project was to offer examples of intellectuals who oppose crimes and injustices committed by their state authorities. The second aim was to honor the intellectuals who put their life in danger, showing amazing courage. So I think that they deserve recognition.
You once told me even they deserve maybe streets named after them in Kosovo.
Unfortunately, 25 years after the war in Kosovo and 17 years after the declaration of the independence of Kosovo, there are no streets or schools named after these extraordinary intellectuals. Unfortunately, these personalities, these public personalities, these extraordinary intellectuals were viewed by majority of the Serbs in Serbia as the traitors of Serbian nation. They were defamed, prejudged, even attacked. For example, Bogdan Bogdanovic, the mayor of Belgrade during the 80s, university professor, author of many monuments in ex-Yugoslavia, he was attacked by Serbian nationalists beginning of 90s. In 1993, there were posters with his picture in Belgrade. Bogdan Bogdanovic, wanted dead or alive. So this is the reason why he left Belgrade in 1993, and he lived in Vienna till the end of his life in 2010. So in one side, these intellectuals were attacked by majority of the Serbs in Serbia, and in the other side, majority of the Albanians in Kosovo viewed them with mistrust, and sometimes they ignored them. For example, when I started to publish these books, The Other Serbia 1 and The Other Serbia 2, I have received a lot of messages from Albanians in Pristina and all across Kosovo. And they said to me, please, Mr. Gashi, do not publish these books. The Other Serbia does not exist. There is only one Serbia, Slobodan Milošević Serbia. So please do not publish these books. We do not need them. But I think that these publications are a modest recognition for the great contribution of these extraordinary intellectuals, for their defense of the human rights of Albanians in Kosovo during the 90s, and for their contribution to a peaceful solution between Kosovo and Serbia. Majority of them supported the independence of Kosovo during the 90s. And it is very bad that the Kosovo Assembly in 2008, when they declared the independence of Kosovo, have not invited Bogdan Bogdanović, for example, who is the first Serb to support the independence of Kosovo in 1991.
I hope that was also alive at the time.
Yes. So I hope that from this project, citizens of both countries will benefit. Journalists, political activists, civil society activists, political analysts, politicians involved in negotiations between Kosovo and Serbia for the normalization of relations between two countries, students, academics, and the public at large, because these books are available online and they are free of charge. They are in 3 languages, in Albanian, Serbian, and English.
Yeah, no, great book, no debate about it, great project. And in a way, these 2 books are connected, because this book wouldn't exist if those guys had won and had been the majority. Now let's talk about your opus magnum, unless you're planning to write an even bigger book in the future. Well, maybe I ask a very simple question. You just answered it very well about this book. Why this book? Why this collection of detailedly described massacres? I mean, it's tough reading, obviously. It's not a coffee table book, even though it looks like it.
It's very difficult to read, but it's more difficult to write.
Oh, I believe that. But can you tell me, why this book?
Because in 2019, I didn't know how many massacres were committed in Kosovo during the armed conflict in 1998, 1999. And I started the research to see what has happened in Kosovo. And the conclusion was that all kinds of violations of international humanitarian law took place in Kosovo in 1998, 1999. But unfortunately, they were not documented properly. So I have identified 10 violations of international humanitarian law that happened in Kosovo during the armed conflict. And I'm going to mention briefly. Number 1, massacres, and this is the topic of my last book that you just mentioned, titled The Massacres in Kosovo 1998-1999. Second is killings and targeted killings. Probably it is important to explain what targeted killings means. For example, the killing of Femi Agani, who was the vice president of Democratic League of Kosovo, and he was the right hand of Ibrahim Rugova, the leader of Kosovo Albanians during the 90s. Femi Agani was killed by Serbian forces, Serbian police, beginning of May 1999 during NATO's intervention in Kosovo. Or the killing of Bayram Kelman, the human rights lawyer, who documented the war crimes in Kosovo during 98-99. He was arrested in his house together with his 2 sons by the Serbian police 2 or 3 days after NATO started to bomb Yugoslavia. And they were killed in the suburb of Pristina. So these are targeted killings, killing the intellectuals, the members of the elite of the Kosovo Albanians. Violation number 3, disappearances. Number 4, rapes. According to Human Rights Watch report, 20,000 women were raped during the armed conflict in Kosovo in 1998-1999. Violation number 5, torture. Number 6, looting. Number 7, arbitrary arrests, kidnappings, and imprisonments. Around 6,000 Albanians were arrested and kidnapped by Serbian forces during the war in Kosovo. And all of them were released in 2001. Among them was the current Prime Minister of Kosovo, Albin Kurti, who was in Serbian jails for 2 years and a half. Violation number 8 is forced displacement of civilians inside and outside Kosovo. According to the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Around half of the population of Kosovo, 1 million Albanians, were deported from the territory of Kosovo. They were refugees in Albania and in Macedonia. Also, according to UNHCR, 500,000 Albanians were IDPs, or internally displaced persons within the territory of Kosovo. Violation number 9 is burning and destruction of homes, schools, medical centers, factories, religious sites, cultural buildings, historical monuments, and so on and so forth. And the last, number 10, but not least, killing of animals. So all these kinds of violations have happened in Kosovo during the armed conflict. It is important to mention that during the war in Kosovo, 98-99, according to the Humanitarian Law Center, non-governmental organization based in Belgrade, led by Natasha Kandic, human rights activist, well-known human rights activist, around 10,000 innocent civilians were killed during the war in Kosovo. 9,000 of them were from Albanian community, and 1,000 of them were from Serbian community. And even today, 1,500 missing persons. 1,000 of them are Albanians, and 500 of them are Serbs. So this is the situation, what has happened in Kosovo 98-99.
What I noticed in your book, so when you follow the Serbian, when you go back to 99, or even today, the Serbian propaganda is, well, more Albanians have been killed by the NATO bombings than by Serbs, which is obviously not true, but this is a propaganda tool that you will still, a statement that you will still find very often. There is one pattern, though, in your book, which I found, which becomes very clear by your book. You had massacres and crimes before March 99, when the bombing began, but on, what was the first day of the bombing?
24 March 1999.
24th of March, the birthday of Albin Kurti, I think. But on that day, from that day on, there was like an explosion of massacres. All of a sudden, it's not one every 6 months, it's like 12 a day. And this goes on March, April. So there is a pattern that in the moment when the NATO attacked, Serbian state stepped up the violent campaign. There's a direct connection.
Yeah, they intensified the massacres and the war crimes and crimes against humanity, against Albanians in Kosovo, after NATO started to bomb Yugoslavia.
And last question for the first round, because of course we also want to talk to the other participants. I only learned via your book and via our conversations about your book something that I didn't know before. And I made a test in the last couple of weeks. I asked it to people, historians, people who are knowledgeable about the Balkans. And indeed, no one could answer this. I asked them 3 questions, telling them the first question you will be easily able to answer, and the second 2 you will not be able to answer. Not all of those were non-Albanians. I guess in Kosovo that would be different. I asked them what was the biggest massacre of the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Of course, everyone knows it was the Srebrenica genocide from 1995. First question is the easy one. And then the 2 questions that no one could answer. What was the biggest massacre of the war in Kosovo? And no one knew it, and I also didn't know it before I read your book, the massacre of Mea and Korenica. In April, I think 27th of April of 99. So that first question no one knew, and there were like historians, Balkan historians among those people I asked. And the second question, which no one could answer, and I also could have not answered before I read your book, what was the religious affiliation of the victims of this massacre? And now I'm telling you why I say this. We all agree, I guess, in this room, it doesn't matter whether someone who was killed was Christian or Muslim or whatever, atheist. However, for some people it does make a difference, and this is a narrative that is very much being used right now. If you follow the debate not only within your own bubble, but in other bubbles, look at what right-wing extremists in Germany, AfD, or the alt-right in the US says. More or less, you will find the narrative, NATO did a mistake in 1999 because we bombed Christians and helped Muslims, and it should have been the other way around. We should have bombed Muslims helping the Christians. Google it, you will find it. AfD members in parliament, it's very easy to Google, they would say, you know, we should, recognition of Kosovo was a mistake. NATO intervention was a mistake, or if it was right, then on the wrong side. And one politician from the AfD just said the project of Kosovo, he calls it a project, just like Lavrov calls Ukraine a project. The project of Kosovo has failed. So this is a narrative I would not underestimate. It is there, it's out there, and it is rather, if you check in Breitbart News or all these sources, you will find this narrative. The West should have sided with Christians against Muslims. Of course, this is absurd because the wars of dissolution were not primarily driven by religion at all. There was a religious factor, yes, you cannot completely ignore it, but this was not the paramount factor. And one thing that I find important, and this is a story I think that should be told, and we decided together we will tell it through a story, is that the most victims of the biggest massacre committed by, quote-unquote, Christian Serbs in Kosovo were Christians, Catholics. Can you tell us a little bit about the massacre of Meja and Korenica?
Yeah, there are many elements.
Is it on? Okay, sorry.
Okay. So there are many elements why Meja massacre is very important to explain, and because this is the biggest massacre in Kosovo during the war. It happened on 27th of April 1999. 349 Albanians were killed by members of the Serbian police and members of Yugoslav army. So both were involved in this massacre, Serbian police and Yugoslav army. This is the first element. The second element is that nearly half of the Albanians killed in the massacre of Meja and Korenica were members of Albanian Catholic community. There are also other elements, important elements. For example, what triggered this massacre? On 21st of April, 1999, members of Kosovo Liberation Army killed 4 Serbian police, including the commander of police for Đakovo municipality, Milutin Prašević, because he was involved in the crimes, terrible crimes against Albanians in the end of March 1999, beginning of April 1999, in Đakovo municipality. He was killed, and 3 other Serb policemen were killed with him, but one of them was Albanian, Nasser Arifaj. He was a member of the Serbian police. And after 2 days, Milutin Prašević was buried in Đakovo. And his wife, I forgot her name, she lives now in Podgorica in Montenegro, she promised him that they are going to kill 400 Albanians for 4 Serb policemen.
You mean she said that at the funeral?
Yes, at the funeral.
How do we know that?
There is a report published by Humanitarian Law Center titled Operation Reka. So it is a very interesting report, and there is this quotation. So they didn't kill 400 Albanians, but they killed 349 Albanians in Meja and Korenica. It is important to mention also that in 2015, United Nations Mission in Kosovo, UNMIK, issued an arrest warrant for 17 members of Serbian security forces for the massacre in Meja. And one of them is Albanian, Muharrem Ibraj. He was involved in the massacre against Albanians in Meja and Korenica. And also, in the end, it is important to mention that all the Albanians killed in Meja and Korenica were buried in a village near Meja called Brekoc. And in the end of May, beginning of June 1999, they were removed from there, and they were sent in Belgrade, in Batajnica. And they were found there in 2001, 2002, and 2003.
I remember that. Thank you very much. Let's move on, and then we have a second round of question, I hope. Ivana Nikolic, I'll start with a general question as well. What do young Serbs in Serbia today know about the crimes committed by Serbs, by the Serbian state, in the name of Serbs in Kosovo?
You can hear me, yes. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for bringing us here. I think this is a very important discussion, and I would also like this kind of discussion to be held in Belgrade. I think it's important, but I'm also not sure if it's completely possible. Because of the narratives and the ongoing attacks on the Serbian civil society, as I suppose you all know. So before I answer your question, I would like to tell a sort of a personal story, because I think it's a very good example of, it's not extraordinary example, basically my personal story of dealing with the past and learning about all these things from this book and many other books is basically can be copy-pasted to any young Serbian girl or boy who who is currently sitting on, or to put it that way, being on our side. So meaning that he or she is completely knowledgeable about what happened and has in that regard confronted the past of the country. So growing up in Serbia, be it today or in 1991 when I was born, means you don't know anything about the wars and about the atrocities that were committed in your name or in the name of your country. So when I was growing up, and then it doesn't really matter if you live in Belgrade or in any other city, town, remote village in Serbia, it's mostly the same. So my parents, for example, they both have university degrees. They have traveled a lot. They opposed Milosevic regime during the 1990s, but still I didn't know much about what was happening. For my generation and for many generations born before me, the war, when you say the war, it's the bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999, because that was the kind of war that we experienced on our skin, even though we didn't know, and many people still today, they don't know why that war was fought. So they don't know the context. Then I went to the university, I studied journalism, and I was one of the best students, yet even back then, which was in 2010 when I enrolled, I didn't know. So I knew about the major things, I knew there were wars, but the context was missing. And in all those stories about the war, we were the victims.
Sorry,
so,
in your family, it hasn't been an issue at the kitchen table, so to speak?
No, I asked my parents a couple of years ago, and then my mom said, well, we didn't want to bother you with those things. They thought it was overwhelming to know about this stuff. But then it's different if you have someone in your family, if you had someone in your family who actually was killed in war or who fought in those wars. In my case, in my family, that was not the case. So I was detached from it, to put it that way. So none of my relatives fought in the wars, no one was killed. Of course, I knew during the 1990s people were coming to Serbia, people from refugees from Kosovo, Bosnia, Croatia. Of course, we knew about the wars, but nothing more than that. And then university, I finished the university again as one of the best students, but then this context was missing. And then it was the end of March 2014, and I got the invitation from my colleagues to join BIRN as an intern, because they were documenting and working on a documentary about one of the massacres, several massacres that were also described in this book. The biggest one is basically in Ćuška, Ljubenić, Pavljan, and Zahač. I'm sorry for the pronunciation, probably. And then I was like, yeah, of course, because I always wanted to do journalism, investigative reporting, so this was a big thing, you know. And I wasn't in denial, I wasn't denying things, I just didn't know about the things. So my job back then as an intern was to go through all these witnesses' statements, Kosovo-Albanian witnesses' statements, and to look for the people that we can approach and interview for the film. And then I was confronted with the facts, with the truth, because then I saw what was happening. And any of these women, it were mostly women and the elderly people there, and also young people who witnessed all those things. They could have been my mother, my grandmother, my brother. It could have been basically anyone. And then when you are confronted with the facts, it's important to note, because it also relates to something that I'm going to say a bit later, is that I was reading the transcripts from the court, from the trial that was taking place in Belgrade. So it's a special war crimes department in the higher court of Belgrade. So I was astonished, and it haunted me for a while. It was really bad. It hurt, to read all those things and to know that it was Serbian police and Yugoslav army, also paramilitary formations that were attacking people there. And that's when I started digging. And then you go to the ICTY, which has amazing, massive database of all those things, of transcripts, audio records, video records, then orders that were issued by the Serbian army generals. And then you can't really deny when you see people, papers that were signed by Serbian generals to destroy the villages, for example, to destroy civilian population. And then I discovered a sort of ocean full of blood, and I think it's disgusting. But what's even more disgusting is that today we live that denial, and that leads me to your question, what do young people in Serbia know? In 2023, Youth Initiative for Human Rights published a very important research report, and I'm sorry, it's only in Serbian, but we are working to translate it in English as well. It's called Attitudes of Young People in Serbia about the 1990 wars. Why we did that? We did it because of this huge denial at place, probably even bigger and more visible since 2012, when the current Serbian Progressive Party led by Vučić came to power in the country. And then we see a lot of relativization, distortion of facts, disinformation campaigns. So we wanted to figure out, to understand what young people in Serbia know about the war, about all the wars, and then of course about some specific events during the 1990s, how they feel about those things, where they learned it from, and things like that. So I can maybe list just a couple of findings, some major things that
But could you do this without using the script?
Yeah,
because that would be better.
I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to read it. I promise.
Only the moderator is allowed to have a script.
Okay. Well, it's a huge book, so it's a huge report. So I just wanted to make sure that I mention everything that is important. Well, first, it was conducted with the people aged from 18 to 30. It's almost 1,000 people, young people in Serbia that were involved in this survey. So they assessed their knowledge as very modest about the wars and the war crimes. And then they also said that they learn very little in schools, and that's also huge problems. In our formal education, you don't really learn about the wars. I remember when I was, I think it was maybe 7th or 8th grade, there was a lesson about the dissolution of Yugoslavia, only 2 pages. Of course, with the pictures, and I suppose you can imagine the pictures they came from the Operation Storm in Croatia, because the victims were Serbian civilians, and NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. And that was everything, because Serbs were the biggest victims of all those wars. Then another striking finding from that report is that young people underestimate number of civilians that were killed in all the wars in the former Yugoslavia. However, when it comes to the Serbian victims of the NATO 1999 bombing, they underestimate the figures. And someone mentioned here a humanitarian law center in Belgrade. They have a list of all the people that were killed during the NATO bombing. It's less than 700 people. But then if you listen to the Serbian government and the public discourse in Serbia, it's like thousands of people that were killed. So when there is ignorance, then you can manipulate everyone. It's very easy. Then, of course, their knowledge is very biased. So they know more, and they are interested in the events where Serbs were the victims. And then when it comes to the other ethnicities, other nationalities, they didn't know almost anything. Then International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia is still a hot topic in Serbia, because young people also, they despise it. They admit they don't know much about its work, but still they assess it as a very negative thing, as something that was primarily established to prosecute only Serbs. and to have this one truth that Serbs were the only culprits of the wars. Then someone mentioned here mass graves in Serbia. We have so many of them, yet 76% of the people that we interviewed, they didn't know about the existence of mass graves. They also predominantly didn't know about the existence of this war crimes department in Belgrade's higher court, which was established in 2003. So it's been 22 years since it started operating. And then if we want to talk about Kosovo, there are some things about Kosovo as well, and I maybe can say this and then leave it for the time being. So more than 40% of people that we interviewed believe that reconciliation between Serbs and Albanians is not possible. That's a lot. And then the author of the report, the historian who worked with us, he has this correlation because people who think this, they've never been to Kosovo. And young people from Serbia, they mostly travel to Bosnia and to Croatia, which is why they think that reconciliation with these two countries is more possible, if I can say more possible, more likely to happen than the reconciliation between Kosovo Albanians. Can I stop here?
Yes, thank you. This was a great answer, but we have to stop because we have more panelists here. I'll come back in the second round to what you said now. Arman Mehmeti, I mentioned that essay of your study of yours, which I read. So we talked not a lot now about Serbia and how in Serbia this is being discussed, or as we just heard, how it's not being discussed. How is this in Albania? I have to admit, this is my weak spot. I do know Serbian, so I can follow the debates there direct.
You mean in Kosovo?
Yeah, exactly, Kosovo, excuse me. So I follow the debates in Serbia as much as I can. I cannot really follow them. I mean, we have Google Translate today and everything, but it's still not the same if you don't know a language. In the essay that you wrote, you quote Oliver Jens Schmidt, one of the leading historians for Southeast Europe, who wrote something that I found very interesting. He said, according to the way you quote him, in the period of normalization of relations between Yugoslavia and Albania, this must have been the 70s, I understand, Kosovo-Albanian historians adopted a communist Albania's nationalist, Stalinist historiographic model, which they have still not relinquished today. Now, this is not a very new quote. It's from 2010 or something, so it's quite a while ago. But first of all, do you agree with this? Is this the state of the conditions? Obviously, we know this is not that there are exceptions, but is this the way history is being described by most historians in Kosovo, or have things become better here?
Thank you, Michael, for that question. I agree with the assessment of Professor Oliver Jens Schmidt, and that's why I used it in this essay or article. In a majority, historians and public institutions dealing with history and memory in Kosovo, be it the University of Pristina, be it the Institute of Albanian Studies, Instituti Albanologis, they are still working under these maxims with some noticeable, as Shkelzen might have mentioned, some noticeable exceptions, which are scientists who were able, during the time of Yugoslavia, to study abroad, to spend research time abroad, who spoke the languages, different languages that is, and were not only confined, and I think this is one of the main reasons why this has happened, confined within one or two languages. A lot of them just copy-pasted the public history in the way it was written and taught in Albania in this brief period.
Just to make it sure, I mean to make it clear, this is still a problem today as we speak, even though this quote is 10 years old or 15 years old.
Of course, now you have a new generation of historians, of let's call them social scientists in general. I believe me and Shkelzen are of the same age, so it takes time. It takes time. I think the Department of Political Science was opened up at the University of Pristina only at the time when you and me started to study, and also, if I may say, also our ambassador here studied there. So it is also a generational question. And as it is also in my case, it is also a question of this ability to move and travel. I was brought up abroad. I was brought up in Germany. I come with a very different approach and experience to it. And so do other scientists that are now writing about these topics all around the world and Europe, especially.
There is another quote in this essay where you quote Schmidt again, saying that, and this is now the problem from the other side, even though Kosovo became the dominant topic for Serbia in the 80s, their scientists remained ignorant of Albanians and their culture and history, which, according to Schmidt, was a sign of their arrogance and racism towards Albanians. How is it with the exchange between Belgrade and Pristina? Does the scientific elite, the historians, the social sciences, scientists, are there in an exchange, or is this just parallel monologues, more or less, what we witness?
Unfortunately, there is a very negative tendency here, and we have to mention this. It's also part of my research for my dissertation, which is on cultural peace building between Kosovo and Serbia. Until maybe 2020, maybe 2018, there was an attempt to have an exchange of academics. There was one of the books that Shkelzen might know of as well, is The Image of the Enemy, that was published. It was a joint publication and research work of Serb historians and scientists, Kosovar ones, Albanians and others. But I think since 2018 and especially 2020, you have a drastic change when scientists at the Faculty of Political Sciences at the University of Belgrade were publicly lynched and threatened, such as Professor Lončar and others, because they were about to take part in a conference and a joint project with their Kosovar colleagues. In 2020 until now, you have not only a turn, but you have a full stop of academic work, which means, sorry if I interrupted you, which means the Ministry of Education in Serbia, the Rectorate in the University of Belgrade, have been told to tell their staff, their teaching staff, their research staff, that they should not cooperate with Kosovar scientists, be it in Kosovo or somewhere else. The last conference was in Pristina, which was quite international and big, was the International Conference on Anthropology. And only a few Serbian scientists were able to come in a sort of a incognito way, personally, to Kosovo. But they can always fear the worst, and the worst is being threatened and lynched and also losing the job. Final point here, and this is what I have found out just recently, there is this RICO, which is this Regional Youth Cooperation Office, supported heavily by Germans, French, and others. High school directors in Serbia who participated in a project, high schools, were fired immediately when the Ministry of Education found out that Kosovar schools, high schools, were participating in the same project. And this is more than just a negative turn. This is very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. So backtracking, basically, which means things that have been possible 5-6 years ago are not possible anymore now. Does it also mean, so let's imagine we want to organize a conference, historians from Belgrade and Pristina discussing the 90s. Maybe not even in Belgrade or Pristina, on neutral territory, in Sarajevo. You would say Serbian academics would probably not come or would think twice whether they can risk participation?
You know, this is where I have to emphasize that there are many really brave scientists out there, many brave activists, people at the University of Belgrade whom I know and I work with in my projects and in my working experience. And they're always interested in joining these efforts. But it's becoming increasingly difficult. They might be able to meet with one another at, for instance, the History Festival, which is very famous in Sarajevo, where everyone goes, even the historians from Berlin. We might do that. but we are not able to go to Serbia, and that is the difference right now. You had last year, if I might mention also this one last thing, you had two big cultural events where you had Serbian authors, writers, presenting their work in Pristina. The one was the International Literature Festival organized by the playwright Jetone Ziraj, and the other one is the Jazz Festival in Pristina. And it was not even news that there were Serb writers, activists, musicians playing in Pristina. You cannot do it the other way around, and that is Mirdita Dobar Dan Festival. We might talk about it maybe in the next round.
Yeah, the next round will have to be a speed dating round. Michael Schmunk, we have to, you have your microphone over there. Of the millions of questions I have prepared, let me start with this one because we are here at the Böell Foundation. Many, many years ago, I was in Sarajevo interviewing, this must have been 2003 maybe, the then director of the Böell Foundation's office in Sarajevo, Mrs. Azra Djajic. I think now her name is Azra Djajic Weber. And she told me something, and I was not sure, do I remember this correctly or not? So I Googled it and I found out she told it to others too, so she did say it. She was complaining about, and I have to say it first in German and then I'll do my clumsy English translation, den westlichen Versöhnungsterror, Western reconciliation terror. She said, you know, when the West tries to facilitate reconciliation, this conceals the real problems. Reconciliation cannot come from the outside. I'm not sure whether I agree with it, but I wanted to quote it. What's your experience as an ambassador in Kosovo, in Bosnia? Can the West, can the outside world contribute, and if so, how effectively to reconciliation, or is this something that really must come from the inside of these societies only and exclusively?
Hello? Yeah. The question could be answered with a clear yes, it has to come from the inside. No question about this. I have lived in 7 post-conflict societies where the issues we are discussing here tonight were top. I would say that only in South Africa, after the abolishment of apartheid, and I was one of the drafters of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Bishop Tutu, where we saw in that process at least some parts and some elements of what reconciliation can be. I have not lived in any of these post-conflict societies where reconciliation has worked. In none of these societies. The international community, and here in this room we are mostly talking, of course, about the European Union and, of course, a little bit the United States. They have provided a lot of money and a lot of initiatives from the outside, but I would frankly say none of these initiatives and projects have led to anything close to reconciliation. Reconciliation is a very long process. It starts with truth-finding, it starts with fact-finding, it starts with the establishment of what has happened, of what the people have to know before they sit at a table and start to build up the first elements of truth. We have seen it from South Africa until Bucha and maybe in other parts right now. Don't forget Rwanda, for example, that we have not really done it right in the beginning, and that's why I'm so happy about the book, we're discussing here tonight, it has actually been the first real establishment of not only narratives, that's one way, but also of statistical data. Without statistical data, you cannot come to the truth, and if the truth is not accepted by everyone involved, if there is no remorse, if people do not talk about what has happened, you don't go to step number 2, which is reconciliation. Reconciliation is a very, very big word. It's a very, very big concept. And I think still we are far away from it. We see now today in Bucha that at least the Ukrainians and the NGOs supporting them have learned a lot from the past, how to do it better, how from the very beginning on collect information, bring prosecutors in from all sides, be they national and international, and keep these data, these documents, and all of that for the day X when the war will be over, hopefully, and then the prosecution side will start.
Thank you very much. I was thinking today, I mean, we cannot ignore the elephant in the room, and this is what's going on these days in the United States. It will have implications for the world, and especially so for the Balkans, where all peace solutions that were found were basically a Pax Americana in the 90s. And now all of a sudden, this power is gone. For me, like the first time since Operation Overlord in 1944, the Americans, the United States, do not stand for freedom and for they have basically, they're not a guarantor of peace and stability and freedom anymore, as they have ever since invasion of the Normandy in 1944, as they have been. What does this mean specifically, because this is our topic tonight, for Kosovo, in your opinion? I mean, maybe you disagree with my analysis. Be free to disagree, but...
No. Oh, I know. Ambassadors never give up when they discuss that with journalists. No, honestly and seriously. I have been in September at a conference on both sides of the Iber River in Pristina and in Mitrovica and Leposavic. We had together NGOs from the Kosovo Albanian side and NGOs from the Kosovo Serb side. After 20 years or so, nearly 25 years, I have been positively shocked by the progress that these young people, students, NGO representatives, what have you, how much progress they have made and foster the theory we have started off with in the beginning, that only it can come from within, and it is possible that Serbs and Albanians, it is hard to believe, but it exists, sit at a table and very practically, very, very practically, day by day, work on the large issue of reconciliation. That gives me hope that if we support, finance such projects. The EU has spent unbelievable amounts of money. As an ambassador, I can tell you, I have seen so much money going down the rivers in this area. The people want to have something to touch, to grip. They want to see very practical progress on the ground. And I have looked into all that what people told me that were victims in Kosovo, what they think should be done. And they call it trauma management. What happened to our beloved ones? Where do they lie? Where are they buried or not buried? What happened to the personal belongings of our beloved ones? Who committed to the atrocities? atrocities. Have the criminals been tried and convicted? The problem of impunity. Have there been any apologies, acceptance, and so forth and so forth? If I may, we talked in the very beginning that this is not only an Albanian victims problem. There have been attacks from Albanians on Serbs in Kosovo as well. One day the telephone rings and Stefan Fellner, the then German head of the international police, calls me and said, "We have evidence, Michael." I said, "What evidence?" "Well, it's the brother of Ramush." What is with the brother of Ramush? Ramush has done some very bad things and we have to get him. Can you do something that he comes in and we can talk with him what is going to happen to him? I called Ramush, and on the fourth floor of our embassy in Pristina on the hill, I for over an hour talked to Ramush Haradinaj, and Ramush said, "Yes, I know what it is all about, and my brother is guilty, Michael. Give me half an hour, I will call him, and he will hand himself in." The then Secretary of State, Wolfgang Ischinger, the later head of the Munich Security Conference, came on Easter to see me to Pristina, because some of you may know, one of his sons has killed himself during the war times. I don't want to go into the backgrounds, and Ischinger wanted to show his other children where it happened, what happened, and so forth. We went to Soareka and met with Badil Hotti. And Badil Hotti has written a book. It's called Escaped and Common. I can only recommend to read it. And we sat in the rest of the house of the Hottis, and he told Ischinger and me what had happened, how he survived in a corner in the basement, and outside on the square, all, one after the other, of his family were killed. I think these are the real issues.
Sorry, I lost you for a second now. What about the brother of Ramush Haradinaj? Did he turn himself in?
He turned himself in, and we know that there was something happened, which also involves Ramush Haradinaj. There have been many hints and facts for what might have happened in some back rooms in some village. I believed Ramush that he apologizes and deeply, deeply regretted that something had happened. But so, yes, mostly Albanian Serbs on Albanians, but there were also some Albanians on Serbs. We have to break our theories and the figures down. You may know and remember the book on Srebrenica by Matthias Fink. He has not collected cold data, as Shkelzen did. He has tried to do it in the form of narratives and stories and background descriptions, something you fluently can read, and you get another kind of a view into what happened at that time. Shkelzen did the other thing, and I think it would be wonderful if at certain points these two different ways of finding what has happened together. I was amazed, and let me just say this. When I looked into the book, which a friendly person that sits in this room here sent me by mail, the brick, and I looked into it. It's also, and we should mention this here, it's graphically done very, very well, and I have to say, although they are awful, the illustration by very good photographs makes the reader, the viewer, really understand how horrible these atrocities were.
Including the cover photography, yes, exactly. Thank you very much also for this very interesting story about Ramush Haradinaj. This is the advantage of inviting former diplomats and not active diplomats, because you guys you usually say much more when you're ex-diplomats for understandable reasons. Now, as I said before, we'll have to do basically our time is over. The organizers told me we can have 10 minutes extra. So basically, I would really suggest, as I said before, let's have a round of speed dating. I'm going to give you very short questions, and you either answer these questions very short, or if you don't like the questions, ignore them and answer something else. But we have to be fast.
Just one sentence, if I may. You document everything, figure by figure, case by case. One night in Pristina, I had two guests in my apartment. We didn't have big houses in Pristina, and I had brought together after long negotiations, a dinner together between Rada Trajkovic from Gračanica, a Serb political woman, and on the other side, Hashim Thaçi, the then PDK chief. And they both had agreed to sit at one table in my neutral place over a dinner, no one else, and discuss atrocities. And it went like, you did this? Oh, I always thought something like this happened. And the other guy says, yeah, and I could tell you even more about this and that. They were actually also shocked by what had happened.
Thank you very much. So now for the last round, let me, no, actually, I wanted to go to, no, we have to start with you, of course, Shkelzen. Yeah, let me, I'm afraid the short answer is not possible, but please try it. One of the most, let's say, shocking or negative aspects of your book is that at the end of almost every massacre that you describe, it ends with the same sentence. To date, no one has been tried or convicted for this massacre. Do we know, you know much more about those massacres than all of us here, do we know the perpetrators in some cases? Do we know the people who killed 25 people in this and that village live today in Niš or Novi Sad or Belgrade? So could we do something about it? Can you comment on this last sentence that basically concludes each and every, or most of the massacres you describe?
Majority of them, yes. Yeah, thank you.
If you start reading, I'll take your paper away.
No, I'm not reading. I'm just looking. Yeah. So, 105 massacres have happened in Kosovo during the armed conflict. And I have included in this book only 83, because for 22, there is no information available at all. So for 83 massacres, the International Criminal Tribunal for ex-Yugoslavia, established by the United Nations in 1993 in The Hague, only the perpetrators, only for 10 massacres were convicted and sentenced. So this is the biggest problem in my opinion, because yeah, the International Criminal Tribunal for ex-Yugoslavia sentenced Nikola Šahinović, the Deputy Prime Minister of Yugoslavia, 22 years in prison. Dragoljub Ojdanić, the Chief Staff of Yugoslav Army, 20 years in prison. Sreten Lukic, Serbian police commander, 18 years in prison. But nothing happened with the perpetrators of these massacres in the territory of Kosovo. They gave the orders, Šahinović, Ojdanić, and Lukic, but what about the perpetrators? So this is the biggest problem.
Do we know something about these ordinary men, as we could call them, about the perpetrators?
Majority of them are in Serbia and in Montenegro. So
do we know their names?
Serbian state knows the names of this, but for example, the Department for War Crimes in Serbia, they have sentenced perpetrators for 3 massacres in Belgrade. Only for 3 massacres, and before 2014. In 2014, when Aleksandar Vučić came in power, nothing has happened. So this is the biggest problem. But another problem, very important problem for me, is the history school books for primary and secondary schools in Serbia. And not only in Serbia, but also in Kosovo. For example, as I mentioned at the very beginning, 10,000 innocent civilians were killed in the armed conflict in Kosovo in 98-99. In the history textbooks of Serbia for primary and secondary schools, the number is 0. Come on, the Yugoslav army and Serbian police killed 9,000 innocent civilians from Albanian community for a year and a half. And in the history textbooks, they do not mention it at all. But the problem is that this is not the first time that Serbian army and Serbian police committed crimes against Albanians. They have committed the same crimes in 1912, 1913, when they occupied the territory of Kosovo after 5 centuries under Ottoman Empire. So it is presented as liberation in history textbooks of Serbia, but in our history textbooks it is presented as occupation. The same thing happened in 1918 and 1919, also in end of 1944 and 1945. So for 4 times Serbia committed crimes like this. And the problem is that they can happen again in the near future if the international circumstances will change, because Kosovo is part of Serbia in the constitution of Serbia. In the history textbooks, they teach students of primary and secondary schools that Kosovo is the heart of Serbia. Kosovo is srce Serbia. And they teach students that we have the mandate from God to fight for Kosovo. This is to prepare children for another war.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Short question that I would like directly to react, Ivana Nikolic, to what you said before. You said we should have such a discussion also in Belgrade, but it might be difficult to have it. I agree with you, we should have it in Belgrade. And I also have the feeling that right now the situation really is worse than, for example, I think in 2006 this video was published by the Humanitarian Law Center about the Scorpions. And then I had the feeling, I lived in Belgrade at the time, there was an open debate and those people who are defending war crimes were on the defensive. Now, I think, yeah, are we backtracking?
We are backtracking, and I can give you a very good example of this. It was 2015, so 10 years ago, and there was this amazing theater show in National Theater of Belgrade. It was co-production by a Belgrade actors and Pristina actors. I think it was Integra. And from the Serbian side, it was Radionica Integracija, I think, led by Miki Manojlović, the famous film director and actor as well. So back then, I was sitting there and I was listening to this theater play, which was so it's co-production, but it was Serbian actors, they spoke in Serbian, and the Kosovo Albanians one, they spoke in Albanian. So imagine it's 2015 and you're sitting in the middle of Belgrade and you're in a state-owned theater, right? And you're listening the Kosovo Albanian actors. And that was amazing. So when you think about that, I think even Guardian has a story about that. But today that wouldn't be possible. Today, that's something that Arben mentioned last year, Mirdita Dobar Dan, the major festival which actually aims to connect Serbian and Kosovo-Albanian cultural scene, was banned, and Youth Initiative is one of the organizers. It was banned. So not like postponed, but just banned. You cannot do that. Why? Because the Serbian state could not guarantee the protection of all the participants. So basically people who came from Kosovo, they were ordered to go back.
It couldn't guarantee, or it claimed it couldn't guarantee?
They claimed they couldn't guarantee. Thank you for the precision, yes. So yeah, if we have this thing in Belgrade, this debate, maybe it would be cancelled, you know, I'm not sure.
Let's give it a try.
I would like to, yes.
Yeah, Arben Mehmeti, last question. You described before the same thing for the academic world, how it's more difficult and difficult for Serbian academics to attend conferences organized together with Albanians. In order not just to describe the problems and maybe with the little hope to have a positive, to end on a positive note, we will not really be able to do that, but to end on an optimistic note, do you have any suggestions what should happen to, I mean, academia should be independent from the state, theoretically. Do you have any idea what should be done, what could be done in order to rectify these developments, to have a counterbalance, a counter-influence, or is this a hopeless case?
Well, two things. I think the space to maneuver is becoming narrower by the day. And the narrower it is, the broader we have to be in our actions. And by we, I mean mostly the non-state actors. And this is where I believe also the power of this book lies. It comes from the non-state actors. It is being supported by non-state actors, or let's call them international cultural institutions and such. I also see in all my meetings, be it in Belgrade or in Pristina or elsewhere in the region, that you have a lot of researchers, also academics at the university level, but also other research institutions who are still engaging with one another.
I could, for example, imagine a historian like Dubravka Stojanovic would not allow the state to tell her which conferences she attends or not. She would just do it.
In the article that you just mentioned, the article that I wrote and was published in 2021, that is part of an edited volume on Kosovo in the 1980s. So at some point we discussed it here in Berlin, that we should really discuss the edited volume, all the articles, both in Pristina and in Belgrade, because it was already discussed in Berlin. So I went to Belgrade, this was 2 years ago, and I spoke with Dubravka Stojanovic. And you know Dubravka yourself, I presume, and she said, I will come for a couple of days, I will take the same bus that I usually take to go to Belgrade, and I will come to discuss the edited volume with you. I think to send a positive note here, we have to remind ourselves of this sentence, which I think echoes through the consciousness of people in the Western Balkans, and that is part of a letter that Bogdan Bogdanovic wrote as a response to what the Academy of Science in Serbia, SANU, tried to do with the memorandum. And he said, unfortunately for us, Serbia is led by half leaders and quarter leaders. You may forgive my translation here. It might not be correct, but that is it. And I think in my experience in the last 10 years and more, I've seen a many good deal of possible leaders in this very long and complex reconciliation process.
Thank you very much. Michael Schmunk, you will have the privilege of having the last word. However, only when he was talking, I noticed that you didn't answer my last question. Your answer was so interesting that you kind of, I forgot. Because the question, which I would like to repeat exactly, is the United States has been the dominating factor in the Balkans, bringing peace. Pax Americana was basically from Dayton to Kosovo, and even in 2001, Ohrid was American-driven, even though Europeans played a certain role. Now with the Americans gone, what does this mean for the Balkans? The Americans are not a factor anymore for peace, and maybe even for the worse. Camp Bondsteel is not some kind of additional security for Kosovo, at least for the time being. Or maybe you disagree with my analysis, but shouldn't people be very worried about a new outbreak of violence without the Americans guaranteeing peace?
No, I would not say that there's any kind of danger for any kind of outbreak of new violence. But more concretely, answering your question, or trying to answer your question, who knows in these days, when I went in 1999 to start our mission in Pristina, the Americans, and we didn't even come close to it, were the friends, the brothers and sisters of all people in Kosovo. People loved them, and I think there were reasons to do so, and people relied 100% on the Americans that they would forever help them and protect them. The curve went slowly down until the point where the Americans also decided that this is a European matter and take care of this more or less themselves. But whenever the European Union didn't show any strength or any resolve, that happened many times, the Americans came back and slapped on the table and talked tough to people in the government. If I jump from there into the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, this belief in the support of the Americans has waned a little bit. The first 4 Trump years, of course, underlined this. But I think under Trump too, but also in general, historians will look again at the data from the end of the Kosovo War until today and may find things where the support seems not to have been as strong as some people thought. It always has been, and some insiders have known this, that Camp Bondsteel, for example, but also many other institutions there, were not only there because of the American love for Kosovo, but also helped American national interest, which is not bad in the first place. But I think there has been a change, latest at Trump 1, when it comes to the questions, will they continue to always protect us in the way they promised many, many years ago? And I would say, no, it will not come back. We will see Grenell around a lot. He is rather a destructor than a supporter for Kosovo, for the whole Western Balkans. But I don't want to judge too fastly. Let's wait and reanalyze certain periods over the last 20 years, if we were always right or if we were sometimes wrong.
Thank you very much. I hope your semi-optimism, this is how I would call it, will be proven to be correct. I just talked some days ago to someone who was in touch with the embassy, U.S. embassy in Sarajevo, and these people there, they don't know what to do. They don't know what they're allowed to say. They don't know what Washington allows them. They're basically not a factor. Same for Kosovo, I'm afraid. So I don't know. I wouldn't trust beneficial American role in the near future, but let's hope my pessimism will prove as having not been justified. Thank you very much for this discussion. I think the idea of repeating this in Belgrade is good because I've asked 20% of my questions. I will ask the other 80% when we meet again at a different... And I'm sure you also have questions. Sorry, I cannot open the floor to the audience because we already took too much time. But I heard there's pretzel and juice outside, so you can ask any question bilateral to the participants. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again to the foundation.